On the far edge of Europe lies a small group of islands, rugged, diverse, and shaped by the tides of history. From these shores, a nation would emerge, one whose influence would reach across continents and centuries. The United Kingdom, as we know it today, did not come into being overnight. Its story is one of struggle and survival, of ambition and reinvention. It is a story shaped by conflict and cooperation, by kings and queens, and by countless ordinary people whose lives built the foundation of a modern state. Thousands of years ago, long before crowns and parliaments, ancient tribes roamed these lands. They left behind mysterious monuments like Stonehenge, reminders of a time when faith and survival were deeply intertwined. Over time, these early peoples forged communities and identities. But their world would be forever changed when outsiders arrived. First the Romans, bringing roads, cities, and organized rule. When Roman legions eventually withdrew, they left behind both progress and vulnerability. In the centuries that followed, new waves of settlers and invaders arrived: Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, and Normans. Kingdoms rose and fell, cultures blended and clashed. Slowly, through war, diplomacy, and shared faith, the foundations of modern Britain began to take shape. These islands were never isolated. Their story has always been connected to the wider world, through trade, exploration, and at times, conquest. Over time, what began as separate realms would grow together, forming the beginnings of a united kingdom. In later centuries, this nation would extend its reach far beyond its shores, building one of the largest empires in history. It would pioneer the Industrial Revolution, transforming not only its own society but also shaping the modern world. The 20th century brought new challenges. Two devastating world wars tested the country's resilience and changed its place on the global stage. The empire would fade, but the United Kingdom would adapt, navigating a new era of independence, democracy, and global connection. Today, the United Kingdom stands as a nation deeply rooted in its past, yet facing the complex realities of the present. Its history lives on, in its institutions, its culture, and the lives of its people. From scattered tribes to a global power, from empire to modern democracy, the United Kingdom's journey is a reminder of how history is shaped, not by one moment, but by countless decisions over centuries. Enjoying the video? Like, comment, and subscribe for more history documentaries. And don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss a new episode. The story begins thousands of years ago, long before the idea of Britain even existed. In these early days, the islands were wild and untamed. Small groups of hunter-gatherers roamed the land, surviving through hunting, fishing, and foraging. Among the few traces they left behind are monuments that still inspire wonder today. The most famous of these is Stonehenge, a circle of towering stones, carefully aligned with the movements of the sun. Its true purpose remains a mystery. Was it a temple, a burial site, or an ancient calendar? Whatever its role, it stands as a lasting symbol of a world-long past. By around 800 BC, a new people arrived, the Celts. They brought advanced metalworking, crafting tools, and weapons from iron and bronze. The Celts lived in tribal societies, each ruled by its own leader or warrior king. Often at war with one another, they built hill forts for protection, many of which still dot the landscape today. Their culture was deeply spiritual. They worshipped gods connected to nature, with druids serving as priests, judges, and advisors. Life was harsh, but their traditions, art, and stories laid the foundation for much of early British culture. Then, in 43 AD, everything changed. The Roman Empire, one of the most powerful forces in history, invaded under Emperor Claudius. After fierce resistance, the Romans established control, building roads, cities, and fortifications. Londinium, known today as London, became a bustling hub of trade. In the north, they built Hadrian's Wall, a massive stone barrier stretching nearly 80 miles to mark the edge of Roman territory. For almost 4 centuries, Roman rule brought stability and connection to the wider world. But as the empire weakened, its armies were called back to defend Rome itself. By 410 AD, the legions had withdrawn, leaving Britain exposed and vulnerable, a land soon to face new waves of invaders and upheaval. When the Roman legions departed in the early 5th century, Britain was left vulnerable and fractured. Without Rome's protection, the towns and roads they had built began to decay, and power shifted back into the hands of local tribes and warlords. Across the sea, new peoples were on the move. From the lands we now call Germany and Denmark came groups known as the Anglo-Saxons. They arrived first as raiders, but soon they settled permanently, carving the land into their own territories. Over time, these settlers established several small kingdoms. Among the most powerful were Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria. Each had its own rulers, laws, and ambitions. Though often at war with one another, these kingdoms shared language, customs, and a growing sense of common identity. Christianity began to spread across the land during this period, carried by missionaries from Ireland and Rome. Slowly, pagan beliefs gave way to a shared faith. Monasteries became centers of learning and culture, preserving knowledge and connecting these kingdoms through religion. But this fragile peace would not last. In the late 8th century, fierce new invaders arrived from Scandinavia, the Vikings. Masters of the sea, they came in swift, shallow-draft ships, striking without warning along the coasts and rivers. Their raids were brutal and relentless. Monasteries, often wealthy but poorly defended, were frequent targets. In 793 AD, the attack on the monastery at Lindisfarne shocked the Anglo-Saxon world, marking the beginning of the Viking Age in Britain. The Vikings didn't just pillage and leave. Many stayed, establishing their own settlements, especially in the north and east of England. Over time, they claimed large areas known as the Danelaw, where Norse culture blended with Anglo-Saxon traditions. The threat of Viking domination seemed overwhelming until the rise of a remarkable leader, King Alfred of Wessex, later known as Alfred the Great. Alfred united the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms against the invaders. Through strategy, diplomacy, and carefully built fortifications, he managed to resist the Viking advance and reclaim lost territories. Beyond the battlefield, Alfred laid the foundations for something greater. He encouraged education, established laws, and began the vision of a united England, a realm ruled not by scattered tribes, but by a single cohesive government. By the 10th century, Alfred's successors continued his work. The once divided kingdoms gradually merged under a single ruler. Though conflict with the Vikings continued, the idea of England as one nation was now firmly taking root. This early unification set the stage for the next great upheaval, a dramatic conquest that would forever change the destiny of the English crown. In the year 1066, a single battle would forever alter the course of English history. William, Duke of Normandy, a powerful noble from across the English Channel, claimed that he was the rightful heir to the English throne. His claim was challenged by King Harold II, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England. On October 14th, the two forces clashed at the Battle of Hastings. After hours of brutal fighting, Harold was killed, struck down by an arrow to the eye, according to legend. The English army collapsed, and William emerged victorious. He became known as William the Conqueror, the first Norman king of England. The Normans brought more than just a new king. They transformed the very structure of English society. A new ruling class replaced the old Anglo-Saxon elite. The feudal system was introduced, with land granted to loyal nobles in exchange for military service. To maintain control, William ordered the construction of mighty stone castles, unlike anything the English had ever seen. These fortresses were symbols of Norman power and authority. Many, like the Tower of London, still stand to this day. In the centuries that followed, England continued to evolve. By 1215, growing tensions between the crown and its nobles reached a breaking point. King John was forced by rebellious barons to sign the Magna Carta, a landmark document that limited royal authority and established the principle that even the king was subject to the law. Though its impact was gradual, the Magna Carta became a cornerstone of constitutional government, influencing legal systems across the world for centuries to come. The medieval era, however, was not only a time of political change, it was also a time of immense suffering. In the mid-14th century, Europe was devastated by a deadly pandemic known as the Black Death. Sweeping through towns and villages, it claimed nearly half of England's population. The loss of life caused massive social and economic upheaval. With so many laborers gone, feudal structures began to weaken, setting the stage for profound transformations in English society. Even as the population struggled to recover, England was drawn into prolonged conflict abroad. For more than a century, England and France fought a series of wars known collectively as the 100 Years' War. These battles were not only about territory, but also about claims to royal titles and national pride. While armies clashed on foreign soil, unrest simmered at home. Noble families turned against one another in a bloody struggle for the English crown. This civil war became known as the Wars of the Roses, fought between two rival branches of the royal family. The House of Lancaster, symbolized by the red rose, and the House of York, represented by the white rose. The conflict was brutal and chaotic, with shifting alliances and devastating battles. By its end, a new dynasty emerged, the Tudors. Their victory would usher in a new era of stability and set the stage for dramatic religious and political changes to come. Henry VII's reign was focused on restoring stability and strengthening the monarchy. He worked carefully to unite the warring factions, reduce the power of rebellious nobles, and rebuild England's finances. By the time of his death, he had established a foundation for lasting peace, and passed on a secure throne to his son. His son, Henry VIII, is one of the most famous and infamous kings in English history. Known for his charisma, ambition, and temper, Henry's reign was marked by bold decisions that would reshape the country forever. He is remembered most for his 6 marriages and, more importantly, his dramatic break from the Roman Catholic Church. When the Pope refused to grant him an annulment of his first marriage, Henry took matters into his own hands. In 1534, he established the Church of England, placing himself as its supreme head. This move was revolutionary. Not just a personal act of defiance, but a seismic shift in the balance of religious and political power. The monasteries were dissolved, their vast wealth and lands seized by the crown. This upheaval sparked unrest and rebellions, but it also gave England a new sense of independence and authority. After Henry's death, his children inherited a kingdom deeply divided by religion and politics. This fragile nation would find its greatest strength under the rule of Elizabeth I, Henry's daughter. Elizabeth's reign, from 1558 to 1603, became known as the Elizabethan Age, a period of exploration, cultural flourishing, and growing global influence. She proved to be a skilled and pragmatic leader, balancing rival religious factions and strengthening her realm. The defining moment of her reign came in 1588, when England faced the mighty Spanish Armada. Spain, the most powerful empire in Europe, sought to invade and conquer England. Against overwhelming odds, Elizabeth's navy achieved a stunning victory, aided by fierce storms that scattered the Spanish fleet. This triumph not only saved England from invasion but also marked its emergence as a rising naval power, setting the stage for future global expansion. The Tudor era was not only about politics and war, it was also a time of remarkable cultural achievement. The arts flourished, with figures like William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and countless others creating works that would endure for centuries. London's theaters filled with audiences eager for drama and poetry, while explorers ventured across the seas, bringing back new knowledge and wealth. Under the Tudors, England was transformed, politically, religiously, and culturally. By the dawn of the 17th century, it had emerged as a unified and powerful nation, ready to take its place on the world stage. The 17th century was one of the most turbulent periods in English history, a time defined by fierce struggles over a fundamental question: who should rule the nation, the king or parliament? At the heart of this conflict stood King Charles I, a monarch who believed deeply in the divine right of kings. To Charles, his authority came directly from God, and therefore it could not be challenged. But Parliament, representing the will of the people, believed the king's power should have limits. Charles's policies, including heavy taxation without parliamentary consent and efforts to enforce religious uniformity, created deep resentment. Tensions between Crown and Parliament grew year by year, until, in 1642, they finally erupted into open conflict. This was the start of the English Civil War. The war divided the nation. On one side were the Royalists, loyal to the king. On the other, the parliamentarians, who sought to curb his power. Families, towns, and entire regions were torn apart by the fighting. For nearly a decade, battles raged across the land, leaving devastation in their wake. The parliamentarian forces were led by Oliver Cromwell, a skilled military commander and a man of unshakable conviction. Through discipline and superior tactics, Cromwell's army steadily gained the upper hand. In 1649, the unthinkable happened. Charles I was captured, put on trial for treason, and executed. The execution of a reigning monarch shocked not only England but all of Europe. For the first time, a king had been publicly tried and held accountable by his subjects. It was a radical moment, a clear statement that no ruler stood above the law. In the aftermath, England entered an extraordinary experiment. The monarchy was abolished, and the nation became a republic, known as the Commonwealth of England. Oliver Cromwell emerged as its leader, ruling first through Parliament and later as Lord Protector. Cromwell sought to bring order and reform, but his strict Puritan rule was deeply unpopular. His government enforced rigid moral codes, restricted public celebrations, and used military power to maintain control. When Cromwell died in 1658, the fragile Commonwealth quickly unraveled. By 1660, the monarchy was restored. Charles I's son returned to the throne as Charles II, greeted by jubilant crowds. The return of the king was celebrated as a return to stability, though the balance of power between Crown and Parliament remained unresolved. Just a few decades later, this unresolved tension would erupt once again. In 1688, King James II was overthrown in what became known as the Glorious Revolution. Unlike past uprisings, this transition of power was relatively bloodless. Parliament invited William of Orange and his wife Mary James's daughter to take the throne under strict conditions. This moment established a lasting principle, that the monarchy would rule alongside an elected parliament, not above it. From the chaos of civil war to the triumph of constitutional government, the 17th century laid the foundation for modern British democracy, a system where kings and queens would reign, but no longer rule unchecked. By the dawn of the 18th century, Britain had transformed from a small island kingdom into a global superpower. Its navy, the most formidable in the world, sailed across vast oceans, patrolling trade routes and protecting an ever-expanding network of colonies. Through skill, strategy, and sheer maritime goods flowed steadily into British ports. The wealth generated from this global network fueled Britain's rise, enriching merchants, shipbuilders, and the crown itself. London, once a modest city, was rapidly becoming the financial capital of the world. But this wealth came at a cost. Much of it was built on the backs of enslaved peoples and indentured laborers, whose suffering was largely hidden from those who benefited most. The empire's glittering success masked deep inequalities and exploitation. While the empire expanded abroad, profound changes were underway at home. In the late 1700s, Britain became the birthplace of a transformation so monumental it would alter the course of human history, the Industrial Revolution. For centuries, goods had been made by hand in small workshops. But new inventions harnessing the power of steam revolutionized production. The steam engine, perfected by engineers like James Watt, powered machines that could work tirelessly and at a scale never before imagined. Factories sprang up across the country, especially in cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Liverpool. Textiles, iron, and coal became the lifeblood of the new industrial economy. Railways spread like veins across the landscape, linking towns and cities, transporting raw materials to factories, and carrying finished goods to markets at unprecedented speed. As industry boomed, Britain became known as the workshop of the world. Yet this revolution was a double-edged sword. It brought innovation, wealth, and progress, but also hardship and inequality. Millions of people left rural villages to seek work in cities. Urban populations exploded, leading to overcrowded housing, unsanitary conditions, and widespread poverty. Children and adults alike toiled for long hours in dangerous factories and mines, often for meager wages. These stark realities sparked debates about labor rights, education, and public health, laying the groundwork for future reforms. During the 19th century, Britain's power reached its zenith under the reign of Queen Victoria, who ascended to the throne in 1837 and ruled for over 60 years. Under her leadership, the British Empire became the largest empire the world had ever seen, encompassing a quarter of the world's land and population. The phrase "the sun never sets on the British Empire" captured its vastness. At any given moment, somewhere on the globe, British authority was present, whether in the streets of Calcutta, the harbors of Hong Kong, or the plains of Africa. In many colonies, Britain introduced new technologies, legal systems, and infrastructure. Railways, schools, and administrative buildings were constructed, and global trade flourished like never before. But this era of expansion was complex and deeply contradictory. While the empire brought modernization and economic growth, it also imposed foreign rule on diverse peoples and cultures. Colonial subjects were often treated as second-class citizens. Their resources were extracted to enrich Britain, while their traditions and autonomy were systematically undermined. Resistance was inevitable. Throughout the empire, uprisings and revolts erupted as people pushed back against colonial domination. The Indian Rebellion of 1857, sparked by resentment of British policies, was one of the most significant early challenges to imperial authority. Though it was ultimately suppressed, it marked a turning point in the relationship between Britain and its colonies. Elsewhere, in Africa and Asia, wars were fought as Britain sought to expand and defend its territories, often with devastating consequences for local populations. The Victorian era was thus a period of immense contrasts. At home, Britain enjoyed unprecedented wealth, technological progress, and cultural achievements, from literature and art to science and exploration. But beyond its shores, the empire's reach was maintained through force, exploitation, and sacrifice. For many, British rule was a symbol not of opportunity, but of oppression. By the dawn of the 20th century, the empire was showing signs of strain. Industrial rivals like Germany and the United States were rising rapidly. Nationalist movements were gaining strength across the colonies, from Ireland to India. Tensions at home and abroad were escalating, and Britain's dominance faced increasing challenges. Beneath the surface of imperial grandeur, the world was shifting, setting the stage for global conflicts that would test the very foundations of the empire. Britain had reached the height of its power, ruling over lands and peoples across the globe. Yet this vast empire carried within it the seeds of its own undoing, as the 20th century loomed with new and unprecedented challenges. In the summer of 1914, Europe was plunged into a conflict unlike anything the world had ever seen before, the First World War. When Britain declared war on Germany, it called upon not only its own people but also millions across its vast empire. From the fields of Canada and Australia to the villages of India and Africa, men were sent to fight on distant battlefields. On the front lines, soldiers endured unimaginable conditions. The war introduced new and terrifying technologies: machine guns, poison gas, and relentless artillery bombardments. The trenches of the Western Front became a symbol of suffering and stalemate. For 4 long years, Britain and its allies battled across Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. When the war finally ended in 1918, victory came at a staggering cost. Nearly 1 million British soldiers had lost their lives, and millions more were wounded or forever changed. The war left deep scars on the nation. Entire towns mourned their fallen, and a generation was left grappling with grief and trauma. The old world order had collapsed. Monarchies fell, borders shifted, and Britain's once unquestioned dominance began to weaken. Though victorious, the empire had been shaken to its core. The enormous financial burden of the war strained its economy, while nationalist movements within the colonies began to grow louder, demanding independence and self-rule. Just 2 decades later, another and even greater threat emerged: the rise of Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler. In 1939, Britain once again found itself at war. The early years of World War II were bleak. After the fall of France, Britain stood alone against a powerful enemy. Night after night, German bombers targeted cities in a relentless campaign known as the Blitz. London and other industrial centers were reduced to rubble. Civilians lived in constant fear, taking shelter in underground stations as air raid sirens wailed through the darkness. In these darkest days, leadership fell to Winston Churchill, whose stirring speeches inspired courage and defiance. His words rallied the nation to stand firm, no matter the cost. Britain's resistance, combined with support from allies, turned the tide of the war. The United States and the Soviet Union joined the fight, and together the Allied forces pushed back against Nazi aggression. In 1944, Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, beginning the liberation of Western Europe. After years of brutal conflict, victory finally came in 1945. But it was a victory marked by unimaginable loss. Britain had endured 6 years of total war, with cities destroyed, families torn apart, and over 450,000 military and civilian deaths. The war also signaled the beginning of the end for the British Empire. The enormous costs of fighting 2 world wars left Britain economically exhausted. Across the empire, independence movements gained strength. In the decades that followed, one colony after another broke away to form independent nations: India, Pakistan, and many others, reshaping the map of the world. Britain was forced to confront a new reality. No longer the ruler of a global empire, but a modern nation seeking its place in a rapidly changing world. From the mud-filled trenches of the First World War to the defiance of the Blitz, these conflicts defined the 20th century. They marked the end of Britain's imperial era and the beginning of its journey toward becoming the nation we know today. In the aftermath of World War II, Britain faced an enormous task: to rebuild a nation shattered by 6 years of total war. Cities lay in ruins, the economy was exhausted, and millions of lives had been disrupted. But from this period of hardship emerged a vision for a new and fairer society, one that would care for its citizens from cradle to grave. In 1948, the government created the National Health Service, or NHS, providing free health care to everyone, regardless of income. Alongside it came the development of a modern welfare state, introducing unemployment benefits, pensions, and social housing. These changes transformed daily life for ordinary Britons. For the first time, access to medical care and social support became a universal right, a symbol of the country's commitment to rebuilding not just its cities, but its people. As Britain moved into the 1960s, the mood shifted dramatically. This was a decade of cultural revolution and rapid social change. The rise of youth culture, fueled by music icons like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, challenged old traditions and brought Britain to the forefront of global pop culture. London became known as Swinging London, a hub of fashion, art, and innovation. But beneath the excitement, serious political tensions simmered. In Northern Ireland, a conflict known as the Troubles erupted in the late 1960s. Rooted in centuries of religious and political divisions, it saw violence between nationalist and unionist communities, as well as clashes with British security forces. For decades, bombings, riots, and assassinations became a tragic part of daily life, leaving deep scars on families and communities. Peace would not begin to take hold until the Good Friday Agreement of 1998, which brought an end to much of the violence. In recent decades, the structure of the United Kingdom itself has continued to evolve. Scotland and Wales gained devolved governments, giving them greater control over their own affairs while remaining part of the UK. Meanwhile, debates over Britain's relationship with Europe grew increasingly heated. For years, the country wrestled with its place in the European Union, torn between integration and independence. These debates culminated in Brexit, the 2016 referendum in which the British people voted to leave the EU. The decision sent shockwaves through politics and society, marking one of the most significant turning points in recent history. Today, the United Kingdom remains a nation deeply connected to its past while navigating the challenges of the present. Issues like economic inequality, immigration, climate change, and national identity continue to shape its future. Though no longer an empire, Britain's influence endures, in its culture, its ideas, and its global relationships. From the ruins of war to the complexities of modern politics, the story of the United Kingdom is still being written, a journey of resilience, reinvention, and enduring legacy. The history of the United Kingdom is a story of resilience and transformation, from ancient tribes to a global empire, and from empire to modern democracy. Its past continues to shape its present, reminding us that history is never truly finished, it is always being written.